Welcome back to part 5 of Blue Jean Dream, a steampunk jewelry tutorial. In this particular episode, we're going to start by sanding down the copper tubing that we had placed in the ferric chloride. And what we're going to use, the first thing is a jewelry file, which you can get online in a package of about 6 for about $7 to $8. You can find them on rockbarrel.com and a couple other places. And I'm using the number 6 file, and I'm just going over the edges that kind of got torn up a little bit by the ferric chloride. Sometimes it'll actually take the metal down a little more than you want. And you can also use a Dremel, which I just use this standard sanding bits that come with it. And just like with all sandpaper or any type of sanding that you're going to do, always go from a coarse grade to a fine grade so that you get those rough edges all the way down. So you can use any technique you want. You can even just use sandpaper. Obviously the Dremel will be a lot faster, as will the jewelry file, than sandpaper, but you can choose any method that you want to do. And we're just going to sand this down to make sure that it doesn't catch on anyone's clothing or skin. And just make sure you go around slightly without putting a lot of pressure on the edge of the tubing. Just feel around the tube just to make sure that there aren't any more rough edges. And then you'll want to use a very fine file or sandpaper to do the final finishing touches, and then just buff it out to make sure you get any of the little copper shavings off of it, which can also cause splinters, and it's not very pleasant. So just finished up the filing, and then we'll move on. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually patina this copper tubing. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to use a compound called liver of sulfur. And we're going to put about 4 to 5 ounces of water, just enough to cover the top of the tubing, in a plastic cup with a small chunk of the liver of sulfur. Now you'll want to use a spoon, a plastic spoon preferably. Metal spoons are fine, but if you do use it, you can no longer use that in the kitchen. It needs to be dedicated to that, and it will patina the spoon as well. So it's best to use plastic implements, and you'll just get a plastic cup, fill it with a little bit of water. The warmer the water, the more active the liver of sulfur will be. So if you use extremely hot water, it will actually react faster. So you don't have to leave it overnight if you do that. And again, the longer you leave it, up to overnight, up to about, I would say, 8 to 16 hours, the better the patina. And this is the liver of sulfur. And anytime you use it, you want to make sure that you use gloves and a mask. Don't inhale this stuff. I wouldn't recommend pouring it down your kitchen sink, even though a lot of people say it's safe to do so. I just don't. Pour it in a bucket. You can take it out to your local waste department and say that it's a hazardous material, or you can figure out locally how you can get rid of that. I just wouldn't pour it down my sink, personally. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and take the tubing, fill it just over the top of the water, over the top of the tubing, and you'll just put a little bit of the liver of sulfur, stir it with either like a wooden stick you can get from a hobby store or a plastic spoon. You just probably don't want to use metal. Like I said, you'll just leave it overnight. And then make sure you keep it out of reach of children or anybody that happens to think it's an odd drink, although they would probably see the piece of metal and not drink that, but just to be on the safe side. Now, since we already coated the top of our pendant with the triple thick, what we're going to do now, while we're waiting for the copper tubing to go ahead and cure, is we're going to actually coat the back. Now just check it, make sure there's no rough edges or any of the triple thick sticking out or anything like that, or the paper coming off. And we're going to cure this with the triple thick. That way the ink or the paper, the decoupage, doesn't get ruined, whether it gets exposed to water or the elements or whatever. We're just going to make sure that we have a unified finish. And again, remember that you want to spray your wax paper with the mold release to make sure that it doesn't get stuck to the wax paper. And just, again, coat it liberally over the back, however much, that you want to have for your particular pendant over the washer. Make sure you get the edges as well. And again, I'm using a cheap paintbrush that I just got from Walmart in a bag for about $5. But as one of our users commented, you can also save your paintbrushes if you wash them out with Dawn. Again, I would still suggest using cheaper brushes simply because you don't want to use a sable or a more expensive paintbrush for something like this. You just wouldn't want to ruin it, because while you can get most of it off with Dawn, you still will have a pretty heavy residue. But that was a great suggestion, so we really appreciate that. And again, you can get triple thick at most of your craft stores for anywhere, depending on what part of the US you live in or where you live, between $5 and $10, and it lasts forever. You really don't use a whole lot. So you just want to make sure that you coat it all, and then we're going to let that sit overnight as well as with our little copper tubing. And when the copper tubing is finished, and is at the patina you want, again, use your plastic spoon or wooden piece and just go ahead and pull it out and just rinse it off, and then, you know, save your liver of sulfur to be disposed of. Usually the back of the actual chemical itself will tell you where you can take it and how to dispose of it properly. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and twist up our blue jean material here. As you can see, we've got both of our ends wrapped with the copper wires we did in the previous segment. And I'm just going to sort of eyeball chain, use about, I would say, anywhere between 12 and 14 inches of chain, because this is the part we're going to actually have the pendant hanging from. We're going to have two sections, one at the top, which will add some beadwork and some embellishments to, and then the one at the bottom, which will actually hold our washer pendant. And this is kind of, since we're doing something that's sort of what people call junk jewelry, steampunk jewelry, or found object jewelry, you're going to have to eyeball a lot of it. There's no right or wrong answer. You're just going to go through and kind of figure out which look you like the best. Maybe you like the chain wrapped around the blue jean pieces, maybe you don't. It's going to vary from person to person and what look you're going to try to achieve. So personally, I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this chain through and just kind of play with it to see which way that I want to attach it. And then we will attach it with some just some regular jump rings and at the ends. And you don't have to get ones that are large. We could go ahead and put the chain directly onto these larger jump rings that we already have, but like I said, you may end up changing your mind and wanting to move things around. So it's a lot easier if you go ahead and attach a jump ring if you determine, well, I don't really like the way this is looking or how it's hanging, so I'm going to move this around a little bit. So it's a lot easier if you just attach your link with a jump ring. And you can use either the loop closing pliers, or like I'm doing, just a bit nose plier and a regular plier, jewelry plier, to close them. And you'll attach them to the larger jump ring, and then it's a lot, like you said, it's a lot easier to kind of move things around and adjust it to where you get the look that you want. And sometimes, you know, in order to go forward, you have to go backwards first. So you'll see me a lot of times, I'll already have the chain placed just so I have sort of a visual of how the piece is going to look, but then I may take part of the chain off or move it around, just depending on the taste and the client that I'm actually making the piece for. So, and always make sure that you check as you go how it looks when it is actually hanging, because you can do things on a bead palette and you can look at it and see how the beads look in ordered together, but that won't always give you the look as if a person was wearing it. So I suggest a mannequin, or even just, you know, pulling the chain or the necklace up toward your own neck and just seeing how it looks. And always try to remember too to think of the client you're making the piece for, whether it's yourself or somebody else, because different people will have you know, different looks and opinions. So just go ahead and close these rings off, and you'll just want to make sure that they're really snug, even though we're just sort of seeing how it looks and kind of laying it out right now. And we'll just get this other chain ready. Okay, now that we have that length of chain attached, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get another piece of chain ready so that we can have the top portion, or where the beads and the pendants and all that will lay. So we'll have two separate sections of chain, one for the top where we're going to put little beads and embellishments on, and one for the bottom that will actually hold the washer pendant. So we're going to do the same thing as before. We're just going to grab a couple jump rings, just lay it out, look how it fits. I would use a longer piece, so I would say about 16 inches for the lower chain where the pendant's going to hang, and about 12 to 14 for the top. Again, you can adjust this. You can always remove links. You can always change the dimensions of the piece. It's not a big deal, so if you don't get it exactly right, don't fret over it. You can easily change it. And that's why we're going to go ahead and attach the chain to the jump ring so that we know exactly how it's going to look and where it's going to hang. We can pull it up, across our own neck or a mannequin and just check it out and see how it looks. So all I'm doing now is just breaking these links, opening up with the pliers, and then, adding another jump ring. Or you can, again, if you want, you can just add it to the same jump ring that you had on the first one. So not the large one, but this actual small little jump ring over here. You can just add that in. Either way. Or if it's a little bit easier for you, you can always just put two jump rings in, so it's easier to move around the piece, which is probably what I'll go ahead and do now, because it'll just make it a little bit easier to manipulate the chain and figure out where I want to place it. So you'll just add the jump ring at the end, and then just attach it to this larger ring here. And as you know, a lot of places sell jump rings relatively cheap. We do sell them on our site as well as other jewelry sites. They also have them. You can get them at craft stores like Hobby Lobby and Michael's. You'll pay a little bit more there rather than actually ordering them online. But it's really up to you how many you need and how often you do it. You can also make your own jump rings with just using the metal and soldering them, or you can do what they call soldered links or rings, or you can have the open jump rings. You just use a round pair of pliers and just basically snip it off and file it a little bit, and you can even make your own. And of course, the metal color that we're using for both the chains and the jump rings are the antique bronze. So we'll just go ahead and attach those to this larger loop. And you may see things like, as you can see, I'm moving the copper wire work that we did earlier down just to sort of adjust it. And you don't, on a piece like this that's found object jewelry or steampunk jewelry, you don't want it to look perfect. You don't want it to look like something that you just ran up to your local jewelry store and bought. It's something that you want to have tattered. You want to have some wear on it, and some, like we'll be adding some debris, and, well, not debris, but sort of roughing it up with different compounds and chemicals that we can use. Like, that's one of the things that the patina will do, is it'll give it almost a gunmetal look to the parts that you use the Sharpie on our copper tubing. And you'll see how the copper tubing fits into all this probably in the next video, but definitely down the series, and you'll really like the work that you did. So that'll really showcase all of that work with the patina and the etching. And so just make sure that you go ahead and adjust your jump rings to get them exactly where you want. And in the next video, we'll go over some more embellishments both to the blue jean and the chain, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to finish this piece up. And we appreciate you watching, and thanks, and don't forget to subscribe.